All right, folks, we're going to continue with our factoring stuff. If we have something that has three terms, we always still GCF. So we look to see if we GCF. But if we have three terms, we have this move that's called X factoring. Now, this is the most common factoring that you're going to see. So I really want to go into detail on how it works. Let's start off by taking this and expanding it. Let's distribute it. So if you were to multiply, you'd start off by doing 3x times 2x. That's 6x squared. Then I would take the 3x and I would multiply it by the negative 5, negative 15x. And then we would take 2 times 2x, that would be 4x. And then we would finally do the 2 times the negative 5, and that would be negative 10. If we combine like terms, there is nobody like the 6x squared, so that's the only term. There is nobody like the negative 10, that's a constant that doesn't have a variable at the end. And in the middle, we can combine the negative 15x and the 4, that would be negative 11x, or subtract 11x. Okay, so the point is, what you need to take away is the thing that what we're going to do is we're going to start here and we're going to try to go back to the parenthesis form, which we call factored form. So looking back at what built the 6x squared, it was this piece and this piece. So these two numbers, whatever's in front of the x's, there's two x's, so whatever's in front of those is going to multiply to make the 6x squared. The number at the end, the negative 10 in this case, the subtract 10 in this case, came from the two pieces that don't have x's. When you multiply things without x's, they're not going to have x. The middle is a combination of both of them. Okay, it's a combination of the first and last, and the second and the third. The insides, we call these the outsides and the insides. All right, so what's our goal? What are we trying to do? We're now going to try to factor this thing. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to see if I can GCF. As you can see, 2 and 15 don't have anything in common. This has an x squared, this has an x, but this doesn't have an x. So this is the best we can do. So we're going to do this thing called an x factor. It's like a little puzzle to begin with. I start off by taking the first number, leading coefficient, and multiplying it by the last. When we multiply those together, 2 times 18, we get 36. Whatever's in the middle goes in the bottom. Now, I'm trying to find two numbers that multiply to make 36 and add to make negative 15. Now, some of you are really good at multiplying and know your factors really well. You could probably answer this question very quickly. If you cannot, go over here and make what are called factor pairs of 36. So in other words, what are the numbers that divide into 36? 1 and 36, 2 and 18. Now what I'm doing here is I'm just taking 36 and I'm dividing it by numbers. I'm dividing it by nice numbers in an organized way. So I divide it by 1, then I divide it by 2. Now I'm going to divide by 3, and I would get 12. Divide by 4, and I would get 9. Divide by 5, it doesn't work. Divide by 6, I get 6. I can stop checking. This is my complete list because the next number I would check would be 7, and that's already past this side of my numbers, my factor pairs. All right, now we're trying to find a combination that makes 15. Well, 3 and 12. Now when I say combined, you can either add them up or you could subtract them and get to the number that you want. So if I take 3 and 12, I can combine them and make a 15. So those are my two numbers, 3 and 12. Now I got to get more specific. What kind of 3, what kind of 12 do I need to make a negative 15? They both would have to be negative. Okay, now that completes the x part. The next part we're going to look at is the setup. Every answer to an x factoring problem looks like this. 2 parentheses with 2 x's and a space in front of the x and after it, in front of the x and after it. These are the 4 positions. Now, like we did over here in green, the first two things in front of x have to multiply to make the number in front of x squared. So that means that this position and this position need to multiply to make 2. Okay, well, they're only 2 and 1 are the only ways that we can combine to get 2. So I'm going to make one of these a 2, and I'm going to make one of these a 1. Now, this number doesn't only do that. This number here doesn't only combine to make this. It also has to work with this position and this position to make these two numbers in our x. So if I'm looking at this, I've got to build the negative 3, I've got to build a negative 12, and I'm starting with a 2. Well, the 2 should build a negative 12. That means this needs to be a subtract 6 or a negative 6. This is a 1. I have to build a negative 3, so this would be a subtract 3. And so I would have 2x subtract 3. and then x minus 6. This is what we call the factored form of this trinomial. Now, just to show you that this works, if you want to double check things, what you can do is you can distribute and see if you get what you had before. 2x times x is 2x squared. 2x times negative 6 is negative 12x. Negative 3 times x is negative 3x. Negative 3 times negative 6 is positive 18. I've got my 2x squared. I've got my 18. And then in the middle, just like we built it over here, minus 12 minus 3 makes my negative 15. Subtract 15. Whatever you want to say. Okay, let's try another one. Again, I'm going to start off, see if I can GCF. 3, 13, 14, they have nothing in common besides 1. And these two have an x, but that one doesn't. So there isn't anything I can GCF, so I'm going to go right to x factoring. I x factor by taking the first thing and multiplying it by the last thing. So 3 times 14 would be 42. And then whatever's in the middle goes on the bottom. Now, if you can just look at this and you can figure it out, go for it. If you can't, if you're like I was as a student, you have to go over here and make a little factor pairs of 42. Start breaking down 42. 1 and 42 works. 2 and 21. All I'm doing is taking 42 on my calculator and dividing it by 1, then by 2, then by 3, then by 4, then by 5. 42 divided by 3 works. 3 and 1, 14. 4 does not work. 5 does not work. 6 works. 6 and 7. I can stop checking, not because that's the number that I want. It does happen to be the number pair I want, but because I'm done checking 6. The next number I would check would be 8. The game is over. You don't have to check 9 or 10 or 8 or 9. You check 6. The next number you check is 7. That's already on my list. Okay, so if we look here, 6 and 7 can combine to make a 13. But now this is where you got to play with your calculator and see what you can get to get negative 13. What kind of 6, what kind of 7 would you have to get to a negative 13? They both have to be negative. Now the next part is, just because I've done this so many times, I know what my answer is going to look like. It's going to look like 2 sets of parentheses with 2 x's and 4 spaces. Now, the first position and the last position have to build the the first position and the third position have to build the 3x squared. The things in front of the x have to build the x squared. So what multiplies to make 3? This one's pretty easy. It's got to be a 3 and a 1. Now, this also works with this, and this also works with that to build these two numbers. So if I've got the 3 times what would make, okay, well, you can't build a negative 7 out of 3, but I can build a negative 6. So 3 times negative 2, that built the negative 6. The 1 then is going to have to build the negative 7, and my answer is 3x subtract 7 and x subtract 2. Now, if you want to, you can go and distribute that, but it'll work. Okay, I'm going to have you pause here, and I'm going to try to get you, I want you, after I tell you in a second, pause and try to figure out just the x for this problem. All right, pause it, figure out your x. Okay, so hopefully you started off by doing 12 times negative 2, which is negative 24, and the 5 goes on the bottom. If you can't break this down in your head, hopefully you went over to the margin and wrote negative 24 or 24. It doesn't really matter if it's negative or positive. Right now, it will matter over here. 1 and 24, 2 and 12, 3 and 8, 4 and 6. 5 doesn't work, so the next number I would check is 6, and 6 is already on my chart. So which one of these can combine to add or subtract to make a 5? 8 and 3 can be combined to make a 5. So one of my numbers has to be 3. One of my numbers has to be 8. I want to end up with a positive 5. So that would have to be a negative 3. 8 take away 3 is 5. 8 times negative 3 is negative 24. Here's my combo. Okay. I know my answer is going to look like 2 parentheses with 2 x's. This position and this position need to multiply to make 12. Now look. you can't just randomly pick the combination that you want to make 12. Now, you can, I guess, and maybe you'll get lucky. But we've got to think about this in two ways. This number that I put here is going to multiply with this to make the 12, but it's also going to multiply with this to make one of our things from the x. This and this are going to multiply to make 12, but they're also going to multiply with that to make one of these things in the x. So let's start to break down 12. 12 and 1. If I use a 1 could build either one of these, but a 12 could not. There isn't anything you could multiply 12 by, at least not that's a fraction. You can't use fractions or decimals. 12 is already bigger than both of these, so 12 is out. That means 1 has to go out with it. Let's try 2 and 6. Well, a 2 could build the 8, that's good, but the 6 couldn't build a 3 without using a decimal or a fraction, and we can't use those. So 2 and 6 and 1 and 12 did not work. That means we're stuck with 3 and 4. Now, it doesn't matter where you put the 3, it doesn't matter where you put the 4, as long as you put them in front of the x's in those two squiggly places. All right, now let's look at what we have and what we need to build. I need to build a negative 3. So if this is a 3, I'm going to use the 3 to build a negative 3 with a negative 1. I can build an 8 with the 4. That means that has to be a positive 2, and I would have 3x plus 2 and 4x subtract 1. Distribute it if you want to. You would end up with 12x squared plus 5x subtract 2. Okay, I'm going to encourage you again to pause here and see if you can figure out how to complete the x on this next problem. All right, let's see how you did. First of all, there's nothing that I can GCF out. So the best I can do is go right into my x factoring. I start off by taking the first thing times the last thing. 10 times negative 6 is negative 60. And then I want to build negative 17. Now this one's a little sneaky. When I break down my 60, 1 and 60, 2 and 30, 3 and 20, 4 and 15, 5 and 12, 6 and 10, 7 does not work, 8 does not work, 9 does not work, 10 does, but it's already on my list, so this is my list. Now, the reason I said this is sneaky is because what is 5 plus 12? 17. What is 20 take away 3? 17. Now, look, it's not a matter of guess and just guess and hope for the best. You have to pick the specific one that works for this problem, and there is a specific one. Let's think about if we took the 5 and the 12. If the 5 and the 12 is the one that we want, that means they both have to be negative, because negative 5 take away 12 end up being negative 17. But if they're both negative, then when I multiply them, they wouldn't make a negative 60. So 5 and 12 actually do not work in this case. It's got to be the 3 and the 20. And if I want to end up with a negative 17, that means I need a negative 20. Okay, I'm going to encourage you to pause. I, of course, will not know if you paused, but hopefully you can pause and take it from here and finish it up. All right, let's see how you did. So I know this thing and this thing have to multiply to make 10. And this with this and this have to build these things in my x. All right, so let's take 10. Break down 10. Is 10 and 1 or 2 and 5? Let's try 2 and 5 first. 2 could build the 20, but 5 cannot build the 3. So 2 and 5. Well, wait, what if I did the 5? Yeah, but then the 2 couldn't build the 3. So either way, 2 and 5 is not going to work. That means I'm stuck with 10 and 1. I'm going to choose to put the 10 there and the 1 there. I could have flipped those around. It doesn't really matter. Now, I don't have a choice. If I put the 10 here, that's got to match up. The 10 can make the 20, so this needs a negative 2. If the 10 and the negative 2 makes a negative 20, the 1 and the 3 is going to build the 3. And so I have 10x plus 3 times x subtract 2. Box it and put it up on my fridge. Okay, I'm going to give you a 10-second lead. I would like you to pause it here and see if you can do the first move on this one. Hint, hint. Think back to how we started today's notes. All right, let's see how you did. Hopefully you saw this and thought GCF. Hopefully you thought that I could take out something in common. Everything here is divisible by 3, and everything has at least 2 x's. If you forgot that part, I would encourage you to pause again here and try to write what's left behind. Okay, so I need 3x to the fourth. I've got a 3 and I've got 2 x's. That means I need 2 more x's. I need negative 36. I've got the 3, so I need a negative 12. I've got 2 x's. I need another x. I need 108. I've got the 3. That means I need a 36. And I've already got 2 x's, so I don't need anything more. Now, once you GCF, it doesn't mean that the game is over. Once you GCF, now we start, and again, we do our x factor. I start with the first thing and the wait, what's the first thing here? Well, if there's nothing in front of something, there's a 1 in front of it. So that's a 1 times the 36, that's 36, that makes negative 12. Again, if you don't know your factors of 36, it's not the end of the world. It's fine. Go to the side of your paper and break down 36. 1 and 36. And by I mean break down, grab your calculator and start dividing. 36 by 1, 36 by 2. 2 works, we get an 18. 36 divided by 3 works, I get a 12. By 4 works, I get a 9. 36 divided by 5 is a decimal. It doesn't work. 6 works, and it's also 6. The game is over. This is my list. Because the other side starts to repeat. So I've got to find a combination that makes 12. Looks like 6 and 6 is what I want. 6 plus 6 makes 12, so negative 6 plus negative 6 makes negative 12. Now, this 3x squared, it's out there forever. So this 3x squared is going to carry down, and then the next part is going to be my parentheses with the 4 spots around x. What's in front needs to do 2 things. They need to multiply together to make the number out front, and they need to multiply together to make the numbers in the x. Well, this one's really easy because out in front of x squared is 1. So this has to be a 1 and this has to be a 1. I need to build a negative 6 in both cases, so I can just use the 1 and multiply by negative 6 and the 1 and multiply by negative 6. And we get 3x squared, x minus 6, and then when we're fancy, if you're fancy like me, when there's 2 of them that are the same, we just put a squared around it. Okay, so from here, you can start the homework. You can reference this video as many times as you want. You can go back and watch it as many times as you want. If you forget how to do this, well, I guess you can't watch it on test day, but before then. All right, good luck, guys.